Getting diverse books into the hands of teen readers. How do we do it? Shepherded by Dixie Yorns, Emily Hargis-Wells, Jennifer Braden, Kaylee Septer, and Valerie Valacento.
Why the article is relevant to the course. This course is all about diverse patrons and public library services to these diverse patrons. And like the article states, our diverse patrons include teenagers. So this article in question discusses how we can get diverse books into the hands of teen readers. And as libraries continue to build an outreach with diverse groups, they must ensure that these groups are getting books that represent their culture. Teenagers are often an underrepresented group in libraries, especially teenagers who are in the minority. A quote from the article states, "They, teenagers, will read the mainstream bestsellers because they can see themselves in the universality of these stories too. But these books, the ones that might help teens on the periphery build a roadmap back to themselves, are the books that can throw a lifeline. They are stepping stones in the midst of rushing waters." Essentially, these books allow teenagers to read about other teenagers like themselves, whether they are African American, Hispanic, Asian, LGBTQA, PIA+, Muslim, etc. They can see themselves in these characters, and that's what's most important.
Meminger does not definitively state research questions in this article, but instead draws from her personal experience as a teen to suggest how we can work to get more diverse books into the hands of those teens who might benefit from them the most. She emphasizes the importance of the librarians and educators in her life that found ways to expand her reading horizons. The following questions address areas that Meminger feels that we, as librarians, need to consider. Meminger states that there is intense conditioning in the media about what is normal and what makes an individual valuable or desirable. The question then is, how do we move beyond the market and promote diverse reading options? In other words, how do we, as advocates for youth, make our role one that isn't just meeting the demands of the market and get young readers past the mainstream books to embrace other works that explore identity and difference? And how do we move teens beyond what they think they should be reading? Although the big hits, such as the Twilight and Mortal Instrument series, are fine, how do we find ways to steer them down other paths through the power of stories so that all the parts of the teen population have the opportunity to see themselves and their experiences? And finally, how can we promote reading materials that might help teens deal with being different? With social acceptance being an important part of survival in high school, the author contends that marginalized youth may be uncomfortable with being labeled as anything outside the norm created by the dominant culture. How then do we get the conversation started that will help us put the books into their hands that they really need?
How do we get diverse books in the hands of teens? When encouraging young adults to try diverse books, the approach is very important. The librarian must be willing to make an effort and use more subtle methods to getting the right books to the right people. The librarian has to be positioned to give a patron a book that will be of benefit to them without being asked for explicitly. It helps to remember what it was like being a teenager. Fitting in is very important, especially if someone is clearly different from everyone else. There are daily demands, societal, domestic, and educational pressures, not to mention physical and emotional changes. This, combined with confrontations due to others' lack of understanding of diversity, can be overwhelming. Libraries should be an escape from this, and the last thing a librarian should do is add more stress. By no means should diversity be avoided. taking the easy way out by not providing any books that may help a young adult trying to find their way, ignoring the issue altogether, or any other technique that does not celebrate the variety of patrons that rely on libraries is a costly mistake. A library is there to serve all of its community, not just an approved section. No book, diverse or otherwise, should be advertised as good for you. This will turn reading into a chore instead of a pleasure. A book that is sold as interesting, tragic, romantic, adventurous, and similar words are more likely to be read. Along the same lines as calling a book good for you, it should not be forced upon a patron. They are not likely to be read, and the patron will most likely not come back due to the pressure. An indirect and open-minded approach is best for working with young adults. With the patron, the librarian must be ready to listen. A teenager is not likely to say outright, "I am feeling lonely because of my sexuality, ethnicity, appearance, or religion. Please help me find books about that." However, the statement may be suggested by other means. By talking with the patron, a librarian can narrow down what issues may be a concern and find relevant books about the topic. The feedback received will also help with future suggestions. Finding out a patron's favorite genres is a key part of knowing what diverse books can be added to a patron stack. A suggested book in the same genre as regular reads will be more welcoming and therefore read than a book that is wildly different. This also shows the patron that their situation has been written about, which can reduce the feeling of being different. The librarian should create a pile of books that fit with the needs of a young adult patron, suggesting one or two as they see the patron at checkout. This method doesn't overwhelm the patron with choices and encourages repeat visits to see what other books are available. It is important that the book is not advertised as about someone different, as again, a teenager would like to fit in. Rather, the book's theme should be its focus and how they are universal. While it is important to provide books in the patron's favorite genre, a book that crosses genres can also be considered. This not only expands the range of books that can be suggested, it introduces the patron to new areas to read that they may have not been interested in before, perhaps because available books were alienating. In the meantime, librarians must keep up to date on young adult books through book lists, recommendations, or other means. As the young adult market is growing larger and more influential, it would make sense to keep track of what is available. Without this knowledge, recommendations become dated as they do not recognize current trends. Assuming the librarian works well with diverse communities, the library itself must be a place where diversity is normal. Promotions featuring diverse characters should be a regular feature. This can be done through relevant posters, Book of the Month clubs, newsletters, or whatever is appropriate. When diversity is welcomed, the library becomes a safe space. In all of this work, it is important to keep trying. There is no guarantee that a patron will like hearing about suggested books or any hint that they themselves are different. Overcoming personal and organizational bias may also be an issue. What matters is that efforts do not cease. Encouraging diverse teens to read books that are relevant to them is an important concern, and it should not be pushed aside because it may be challenging. Young adult librarianship is not for the lazy.
Findings and conclusions. Meminger did not give definitive results for the methods she mentioned. She asks that if others have other ideas to please let her know. The one thing that she does recommend is to keep trying. There is no one way to introduce diverse material to another person. Each person is different, so the approach may be different. Just like previously stated, talk to your patrons, get to know them. Add diverse books into the piles of the materials that they requested. Focus on the universal themes of the books. Even offer themes that fit across the genres that they already read.
And finally, we look at what future research might address. So the article gives suggestions on methods to use to get teens interested in more diverse books. Research can be done on which of these methods are being used, and out of them, which methods are the most successful. The two main tactics we can look at are the pile method, or mixing the teens' preferred genre with librarian suggestions, and more direct approaches, such as how the librarian gets information from teens on what sort of books they're looking for, and how they make those book suggestions to them. Another would be to assess teen responses to individual diversity topics in books, such as faith, characters of color, LGBTQ characters, characters with disabilities or other body-related issues like weight and skin, and any other books portraying marginalized youth. And last would be to survey teens directly, mainly regarding how they perceive their librarian's efforts to suggest other books and how well it's worked. And aside from books that they normally read, research can be done on what sort of book characters they would like to see more of that they could better relate to.